It happened just last fall, in the outskirts of Blue Hollow, Oregon. My name's Evan, and I was 26 at the time. I'd recently been laid off and had way too much time on my hands. I've always had this weird obsession with abandoned places. There's something hauntingly beautiful about them. One foggy afternoon, I decided to check out an old house I'd heard stories about growing up. They called it the Granger Place. Everyone said it had been empty for at least 25 years, ever since the Granger family vanished without explanation. Most of the town didn't even mention it anymore. The woods had practically swallowed it whole. I had passed it dozens of times as a kid but never dared get too close. That day, though, I was alone, restless, and maybe just a little reckless. With a flashlight, a pocket knife, and a bottle of water in my backpack, I set out from the edge of town. The gravel path leading to the house had almost disappeared, just a faint indentation beneath overgrown weeds and fallen leaves. I followed it deeper into the trees, walking maybe 400 yards before I saw the house rise from the mist like a forgotten tomb. It was a massive, two-story wooden home, rotting and bent with age. No driveway. No mailbox. Just a dark silhouette against the gray sky. I walked up to a shattered window and leaned in. Silence. Just the sound of leaves crunching behind me, probably squirrels. I waited 30 seconds, maybe more, before walking to the front door. It was cracked open. A sharp chill ran down my spine, but I pushed it wider and stepped inside. The smell hit me first like mold, wet wood, and something fouler that I couldn't name. The living room still held a decaying couch, and shattered frames littered the floor. Dust hung in the air like fog. It was like time had stopped, but the decay never did. I moved slowly, my flashlight sweeping across yellowed wallpaper and broken furniture. Each creak underfoot made my heart beat faster. The kitchen was coated in grime, plates still in the sink. Then I made the worst decision. I went upstairs. The staircase groaned with every step, threatening to collapse. The second floor had two doors, one wide open, one shut tight. The open room was empty. Barren. Nothing like the clutter downstairs. That's when I heard it. A thud from below. It wasn't a creak. It wasn't the house settling. It was sharp, deliberate, and close. My body froze, every hair standing on end. I whispered to myself, "Get out. Now." I rushed down the stairs, sweeping my flashlight frantically. Nothing moved. But the silence felt wrong. Smothering. I turned toward the exit. The door was shut. I knew I had left it open. Wide open. I lunged for it and yanked the handle. It didn't budge. Locked. Bolted. From the outside. Someone had sealed me in. That's when I truly panicked. I ran to the window I'd looked through earlier. I didn't care about the glass. I shoved my bag through first, then hauled myself out, slicing my arm on the frame. I hit the ground hard and bolted into the woods, shutting off my flashlight. I didn't stop to breathe. My mind screamed, someone is in that house. And they wanted me trapped. I veered off the path, stumbling through branches and brambles, bleeding, my heart pounding like a drum. After about a minute, I saw a flicker of light up ahead. Not white. Red and blue. I ducked behind a tree. Two police cruisers were bumping over the overgrown path, their lights cutting through the fog. They passed within 20 feet of me and headed straight to the house. I stayed frozen. Watching. Waiting. The cars reached the front yard. Officers got out with flashlights drawn, rushing toward the entrance. Something in me knew they weren't there for me. They were responding to something else. I watched for another 30 seconds, then turned and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night. In the days that followed, I scoured the news, forums, police radio logs, anything. Nothing ever came out about that house. No reports. No arrests. Not even a mention. It was like it never happened. But I know what I saw. I know that someone, or something, was in that house with me. And it wanted me inside when the police arrived. Maybe I interrupted something I wasn't supposed to see. Or maybe I was meant to be part of it. Whatever the case, I'm lucky to be alive. But I still dream of that door closing by itself. And what might have been standing just behind it? It was the summer of 2022. I was 24, finishing a trade program in Boise, Idaho, and living with my two closest friends, Tyler and Marcus. We shared a cheap 3-bedroom apartment near the city edge. Between classes, night shifts, and life's chaos, we rarely had the same day off. But that Friday night, we did. We were bored out of our minds. Tyler, always the one digging into weird Reddit threads, mentioned a place he'd read about, a defunct paper mill out near the river flats. Supposedly closed for over a decade, it had become one of those urban legend kind of places. People talked about shadows seen through the windows, screams that echoed at night, and how no animals ever nested nearby. Naturally, we decided to check it out. We loaded into Marcus's beat-up Toyota Tacoma and headed west. 15 minutes out of the city, the street lights disappeared. Civilization thinned into open plains and long stretches of empty road. The mill finally came into view, a hulking black silhouette under a sickly orange sky. We parked 2 blocks away near a shut-down diner. Not a single person in sight. The area felt dead. As we approached the building, the sheer scale of it hit me. It was enormous, easily 5 stories tall, with exterior scaffolding and rusted silos towering into the sky. Barbed wire curled along the fence like vines, but someone had already cut through it in one corner. We slipped inside. The moment we stepped through the metal door, something shifted in the air. It was colder. Still. Heavy. Like the entire building was holding its breath. Tyler clicked on his flashlight, followed by the rest of us. The main chamber stretched 100 feet in all directions. Massive machines sat rusting like forgotten beasts. The air smelled like wet iron and old oil. Graffiti covered almost every surface, but even that didn't dull the dread crawling up my spine. The floor groaned beneath our feet. Wind moaned through cracked windows, causing the loose metal to clatter against itself like distant chains. We didn't speak much. We just moved, curious but cautious. I eventually drifted toward a side hallway, slowly exploring the shadows. I paused at the doorway and turned back. In the dim light, I saw someone standing near a support beam, half-shadowed, probably Marcus or Tyler. I assumed they saw me and kept walking. The hallway was long and narrow, flanked by old offices and storage rooms. I pushed through a heavy metal door into another chamber that smelled of mildew and rot. A conveyor belt stretched across the room, and above it was a rusted catwalk, the ladder still dangling. Then I heard footsteps coming from the hallway I'd just exited. I smiled. Tyler? Marcus? No reply. The footsteps stopped behind the door. I turned, flashlight ready, and the door creaked open. My beam cut through the air, but no one was there. My stomach dropped. Guys. I called again. Silence answered me. A cold sweat broke across my neck. My pulse raced. I stepped backward, flashlight trembling in my grip. Then came the sound that will haunt me forever, a shuffle behind me too close. I spun around. He was there. A man, if you could call him that, stood 6 feet away. Filthy. Hair matted to his face. Clothes torn and stained. His eyes, they didn't blink. Just stared, wide and wild, with this empty glaze that made my insides turn to ice. Then, without a sound, he lunged. I screamed. Not yelled, screamed. I slammed the door behind me and sprinted back down the hallway, the sound of his feet slamming the ground not far behind. My legs burned. My lungs begged for air. I turned corners blindly, flashlight bouncing violently. I burst back into the main chamber. Run! I shrieked. Marcus and Tyler appeared from behind one of the machines. I could barely speak as I grabbed them both. He's in here. Someone is in here. We didn't wait. We didn't ask questions. We ran. Back through the jagged fence, tearing our clothes on the barbed wire. Through the dark, down the road, into the truck. Marcus floored it before the doors even shut. Only when we were halfway back to the city did I finally speak. I told them everything. The footsteps. The empty hallway. The man. The dead eyes. Tyler went pale. He told me something that chilled me worse than the man's face. When you walked off, I was right behind you. Then Marcus called me over to look at some graffiti. I figured you'd doubled back. So who was the figure I saw watching me go into the hallway? The truth is simple and sickening. Someone was in there with us. Waiting. Watching. And when I split off, they followed me. Stalked me. Hunted me. We reported it anonymously, but I don't think anyone ever followed up. No news. No police statements. No arrests. It's like it never happened. But I remember. Every night, I still remember. That face. Those eyes. And the feeling that I wasn't supposed to leave that building alive. It happened 6 winters ago, in the outskirts of St. Hollow, Maine. I was 16, still in high school, and my best friend at the time was a kid named Brandon. We did everything together, played games, explored abandoned places, killed time after school doing whatever we could find. The kind of friendship where silence never felt awkward. It was the start of winter break. The air was brittle and cold, and the streets were silent under a pale full moon. We'd spent most of the day in Brandon's basement, switching between Xbox and YouTube horror videos. Eventually, boredom crept in and pushed us outside. We wandered the edge of town, coats zipped high and breath fogging in front of us. That's when we ended up near the overgrown path at the end of Ridgeway Lane. It was barely visible unless you knew what to look for, a narrow, cracked road that vanished into a wall of trees. And at the end of it stood the old St. Mary's Church. Every kid in town knew the stories. People said it was cursed, that it hadn't been touched since the congregation mysteriously left decades ago. I remember being terrified of it when I was younger. I'd cover my eyes when we drove past. But standing there that night, with the moon casting a silvery glow through the bare trees, I felt something else, curiosity. "Wanna go see if it's still standing?" Brandon said. We didn't need to answer each other. We just turned and started walking down the forgotten road. It was a rough path, potholes, frost-cracked asphalt, vines clawing at our legs. The woods around us seemed to hush, as if we were entering sacred ground. When we reached the clearing, the church rose before us like a corpse emerging from the soil. The steeple leaned slightly to one side, and the wooden siding was blackened with age. The fence surrounding the front yard was almost completely consumed by thorny shrubs and dead vines. We found a broken section and slipped through. There were no lights. No sounds. Just the crunch of our boots on frozen grass. The front doors loomed in front of us, tall, arched, and weathered with rot. I pushed one open. The sound it made was something I'll never forget. A slow, bending groan followed by a scraping shriek as it dragged against the warped wood floor. It echoed through the vast chamber beyond. We stood at the doorway and peered inside. The sanctuary looked almost untouched. Wooden pews lined up in perfect rows, no graffiti, no smashed windows, not even a layer of dust we could see. It was like the place had been preserved, waiting for someone. Waiting for us. "Creepy how clean it is," Brandon whispered. I nodded, then stepped in. Our footsteps echoed sharply under the high, vaulted ceilings. The stained glass windows were murky with grime, letting in just enough moonlight to see shapes but not details. It felt like the building itself was breathing slow, quiet, steady. We walked slowly down the aisle. As we neared the altar, a sudden thud rang out from somewhere in the darkness. We both froze. It wasn't a small creak or a groan. It was heavy. Intentional. We whipped out our phones, flicked on the flashlights, and scanned the room. Empty. Every corner, every pew, clear. No movement. Just shadows dancing on walls that hadn't seen light in decades. "Maybe something fell," Brandon offered, but his voice was shaky. He pointed to a hallway near the front door, suggesting we check it out. Reluctantly, I agreed. We walked to the side wall where an old wooden door sat barely ajar. I pushed it open with my foot, light trembling as it scanned the room beyond. Inside were stacked chairs, forgotten boxes, and what looked like a broken altar shoved to the corner. The room smelled of mildew and cold wood. Then we heard it. Thump. Thump. Footsteps. They were coming from the main sanctuary, from the direction of the altar, the exact spot I had just been standing. Brandon killed his light. I followed. Through the sliver of the doorway, we stared into the pitch black. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. And we waited. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. Slow. Deliberate. Then we saw it. Just for a split second someone moved through the darkness. A tall silhouette glided past the altar, headed toward the entrance. It didn't make sense. There was no door back there. No other way in. That meant they had been hiding right behind me. We couldn't see a face. No details. Just that it was real. And then the footsteps stopped. Silence. A moment later, we heard the creak of the front door closing again. Still frozen, Brandon and I exchanged a glance that said everything. Do we run? Or do we stay? We stayed. We waited in silence, hearts pounding like drums. Every passing second felt like an eternity. After maybe 5 minutes, when it felt like the weight of the air might crush us, we decided to run. We bolted out the side door, through the twisted yard, back onto the overgrown road, and didn't stop until we hit the main street, gasping for air. I looked back once. The church stood in the distance like a tomb. Still. Silent. And waiting. We never told anyone, not seriously. No one would have believed it anyway. And for a long time, I tried to convince myself it was a drifter, maybe another explorer, someone who got there before us. but deep down, I know that's not true. Because there were no other footprints. No signs of entry through the back. And that figure, it didn't walk like a person. It floated. It watched. And it was already there before we ever opened the door.